Well, hopefully I don't have anything in my teeth because I've already been eating this delicious meal delivered from Grubhub because it's time for dinner with someone I've known for many, many years, none other than Liquid Steve. How's it going, Steve?
I'm doing very well. It's
And
good to see you, Travis.
Thank you, thank you. What are we eating today?
This is Jersey Mike's. It's a sub. There's a lot of sub places, obviously, you know, and this happens to be my favorite sub. I had the number 17. I think you got the Italian.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So delivered by Grubhub, of course, as is this interview series where I sit down with friends that I've known for a long time to talk a little bit about, the past, the present, the future, and learn a little bit more about them. So getting into things, Steve, I think I know a lot about you from basically the time you got into esports on, but I don't really know much about, before then, like what your career was and what you were doing, where you were at when you got into games. So I like to just learn a little bit about that here at the beginning.
Yeah.
So first off, I mean, what part of, because you grew up in the U.S., right?
I did grow up in the U.S. I was born in Burlingame, California, and then when I was, I think in second grade, my parents were, this may be a little TMI, but hell, they weren't doing so well in their marriage, and I think a lot of it had to do with like they were around all of my cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents, their parents, and they're like, look, we're either going to divorce or let's move with the kids and try to save our marriage. And so they decided to go to Virginia, of all places, and so pretty far away from San Francisco, and that's where I was raised. So I grew up in Leesburg, Virginia, which at the time was just like middle of nowhere. It's basically West Virginia is like the way to think about it from a branding perspective. But yeah, that's where I grew up.
When did you first start getting into games?
So my dad was a computer consultant. That was his profession, and so he had a computer in the house when we were growing up. And this is like early. This is before the internet. This is like you remember like the discs, like these ones. I'm talking about the discs that were like
the big floppies.
The big floppy discs. You know what I mean? Like kind of crazy. Yeah, so I played games back then on the computer, and that was kind of like my go-to. I also had an Atari, I think was like my first console, and my dad had a arcade, like one of those big arcade, like the pinball,
cabinets,
like the pinball machine, but it was a Centipede.
Oh, okay.
So
So you're very retro.
I'm telling a little bit of my age right now.
Yeah, you look so young, and yet the way you speak about these early days, I think perhaps young for your age might be the right way to put it.
Thank you.
Okay, so what about eventually the more competitive or multiplayer games? Like, what was the first thing that you played that kind of led you to just feel like the competitive spirit, I think that would drive you later on in your career?
Yeah. You know what's interesting? You would never guess this. And even though it wasn't technically multiplayer, it was the first time I ever remember having a multiplayer experience on a video game. And that game was Oregon Trail.
Oh!
And I think it was like required in a lot of curriculums, at least in the States. But it's obviously not a multiplayer game. But you would go to the computer lab and you would die of dysentery or whatever it ended up being, and then you would write on your tombstone. So you would always write on your tombstone for the next class, and then they would read your tombstones when they would play the game because it was all the same kind of like save file.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that was kind of like my first, at least memory of like interacting with somebody else from a multiplayer experience through tombstones on Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
But anyway, the real answer is my first multiplayer. I mean, I would always play Halo 1 with my brother is probably a good memory. Oh, in college, I played so much GoldenEye.
Oh, yeah, N64.
Oh my gosh, the amount of times that I would play GoldenEye with my friends in college, and that was it. I mean, I remember like years of playing that. And of course, that wasn't online though. That was all like couch, right? And then I think the first real multiplayer game that I played was, I think it was either StarCraft or Dota.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, no, it was Warcraft.
Warcraft, okay.
It was Warcraft, yeah.
When is Team Liquid going to be getting an Oregon Trail esports team? It would actually be a great April Fool's joke. To
It really would. You know, we could get the big wagon and do a whole theatric and yeah, I know. Do they even still have that in schools?
I think they do. I mean, I remember at some point in time, I think they ported it to like tablets and stuff like that and phones, so you could keep playing it there.
But like, is there even gaming required in the curriculum now?
I don't know.
We're
so out of touch with the youth. You know, like who
they're
knows?
just playing Fortnite. Like
yes, exactly. No, exactly.
It's like required curriculum.
Well, there's a bunch of stuff. You know, like Assassin's Creed does like educational stuff with their games, where they have like an educational version of it where you can explore the ancient cities and stuff. So like, I do think that stuff is moving in. But okay, so getting back to you. So what did you do sort of as you became an adult? I think you went to school, yes, university?
Yep. So I went to James Madison University, which is in Harrisonburg, Virginia, which is, still in Virginia. It was state school. You know, I was the kind of kid where I didn't really apply myself very much when I was in high school. I had kind of like subpar grades. I was a smart kid, but I just got distracted, and when I got to college, I decided to apply myself finally, and I feel like I barely got in. I definitely wouldn't have gotten in today's standards, but yeah, I went to JMU, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I think as somebody that was the first in their entire family, between grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, to ever go to college, it was like, I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, Steve made it to college!"
Yeah.
Like, wow, And I needed to pay for college, so I was like working at Applebee's and Outback, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I just went into business, like, because it was like business, like
general enough. Yeah.
General enough. So I did that.
Okay, and then I'm trying to remember. I think, if I recall, you were working like on the investment side in DC when you first started to do esports. Am I remembering correctly?
Yep. So breezed through college and then graduated early. And I think I said to myself, I just want to make money. I know that sounds very...
People will love that, given all the memes out there. I just want to make money.
I'm being super honest in this thing. I was just like, I just need to make money.
Sure.
So, where do you go to make money when you get out of college?
Yeah.
Finance.
Right.
So I decided to go into finance. And that's when I started building my own financial planning practice. And, I got my Series 7 Life and Health, Series 66, and I was doing a lot of day trading and investment advice, and it's very much build your own business in that type of genre. You have to build a practice, you have to find clients on your own, and then you provide services to them. And so I just kind of rallied. I built a pretty big practice. I think I had 400 clients when I transitioned out, and had a good amount of money and assets under management. And it was just my life as like a day trader, financial advisor, dude. So I did that for a while.
So what was going on with gaming during all this time, right? Because, okay, so we know you graduate, you build this practice. Like, on the sidelines, it sounds like maybe you're still keeping up with a bunch of the gaming stuff, which I know, eventually you make the jump. But kind of before then, how were you staying engaged with games specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I was always playing games. So anytime I had free time, I was playing whatever was relevant at the time. So it was like StarCraft, Warcraft, and a little bit of Civilization while I was in college, and Dota. And then when I got out, I think I was playing a lot more Civ for the most part. And then my Civ group, they decided, there's a new game coming out. It's called Han. And so we all, my whole group moved from Civilization to Han, and we started playing that. And then the beta for League of Legends dropped. And then I switched to League and played that way too much.
How early did you play League? Like in its release timeline?
It was like in beta.
Okay, so you were another one of the beta people.
I was a beta person.
Okay, yeah. There's
early.
I'm so sad that the forums went down because Riot removed the forums. In the back day, you used to be able to look at they would show rankings. There were old forum posts from like 2009 or something, where they would show rankings of all like the top players from that time, and you'd see people like Dan Din and probably yourself and like all these old school people. And so yeah, I have similarly. I got into the beta through a friend that was working at Riot. As I was like, oh, this little indie game, which now has become like a bit of a meme, right? But it's very funny. Okay, so you got into the beta. What were your early thoughts about the game? Were you like immediately hooked, or were you like?
Oh no, I was immediately hooked.
Okay,
I was immediately hooked. I mean, I don't know if you recall, but a lot of the when League of Legends was about to drop and they were kind of announcing what the game was going to be like, they started talking about like, oh, there's not denying of CS, and it was going to be like this simplistic version of Dota, and you know the elitism of like the elite, you know, like Dota community, like hardcore gaming community, just kind of like they look down on League of Legends, if I'm going to put it, you know, straight. And then and I think, you know, I started playing it. I think I may have went in a little bit with that mentality, but then I started playing it and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was just so much fun. And actually there's a couple streams of me like on Justin TV that are saved VODs of like me playing, like I think during beta. It's like it was a long time ago.
Really, right around the same time streaming was taking off too.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. So when did you start doing like early tournaments, or how did you get into competing? Because people don't know this. A lot of people don't know this. But before you were running the team, you were actually playing on the team. So when did that start to happen?
Let's see. I think it all started with Go for Lols.
Yeah.
Which were run by ESL. They were just basically online tournaments that had a bracket system, and then whoever won the goal for LOL, and they were run I think every Sunday, you won $100, which is like, you know, you need to split that amongst everybody.
Right.
And so it wasn't just like a small tournament. It was basically like 4 times the length of Clash.
Right.
Is today. You would spend your entire day.
Right. And there'd always be delays and stuff, and so it's like suddenly 1 a.m. and you're
Yep. So I had a Goal for LOL team that I would play on, and we started doing pretty good. And then there was one moment in particular where there was this thing called the ESL Pro League.
Yeah.
And it was not weekend tournaments, but an actual league that would run over a certain period of time, and there was a set number of teams that were in the league, and I wasn't in the league. And so they did this post. It seems kind of crazy, but they did this post saying, if you want to get into the league, you could write an essay.
Oh, really?
That was the qualification to get into the league.
I don't remember this.
Write an essay.
Okay.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. I guess that's how you just delineate people. But yeah, that's very funny.
So of course, you know, Mr. Business Steve, I like go and I write this amazing essay.
You know what's funny is that if you want, years and years later, Riot would tell you, if you want to get into this league, write a very long essay.
A franchise application, a Valorant application.
Yes. It's essentially the same thing, right?
How history repeats itself.
Yeah. Okay, so sorry. So they asked you to write an essay. And so, so you wrote the essay, presumably.
I wrote you know what? I wish I need to go back in my email. It would be a true gem to find this essay, because I forget what I wrote. But like, so I wrote the essay, got accepted. And then I was like, oh my God, I don't have a team. I basically lied in my essay that I had this team and ready to go. Yeah. And so then I had to form a team, and I kind of knew like I could be able to form it. But like then I formed a team, and we joined the ESL Pro League, and we started competing against all the teams that were kind of that early right out of beta.
Yeah.
And and surprisingly we did pretty good.
We
were winning.
Unrestricted?
Yeah, exactly. So,
the name of the team. Yeah.
The name of the team was Unrestricted, and I think there was some sort of company that was called Unrestricted that sold something.
So you'd already found a sponsor somehow for this. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So because I knew that I had to cover some costs associated with running the team, and I think the predominant cost was like flights and hotels to major events and stuff, and so Unrestricted helped out and helped cover some of the costs. But at the time, this is all like just a hobby.
Is primordial. Yes.
This is like some of my friends are going to the bar. Yeah. They're going on vacation. They're hanging out and doing stuff. I'm like playing in Golf for Lols and like doing the ESL Pro League on the side. You know, so it was very much a hobby. It wasn't at all thought of from even my perspective as a business.
Yeah.
You know.
When did you start to think it could become an interesting business?
Oh, that's a good question. I think when I did the first contract with Curse Inc. So Curse Inc. is basically a conglomerate of a bunch of online properties that they aggregate and then they sell media against. And they're really good at starting new websites or acquiring websites and then populating that with content. And I don't know if they acquired or they created, but I think they created a site called LOL Pro, I think it was called LOL Pro.
Yes.
And the analogous would be like, I don't know, Mobalytics or LOL Chess or something like that.
Guide
like
website.
Guide website is a good way to think about it. But it wasn't just like the automatic API of pulling data from whatever was happening in the game servers to then show you what to build, like a Blitz app or something. It was more handwritten guides from pro players. And so I negotiated a contract with Curse in order to supply content on the website. So that meant I could then go to the pros within the community, be like, hey, do you want to write a guide on Soraka or Scion? I'll be able to pay you $100 or $50. I can't remember the exact amounts, but it was pretty nominal.
Right.
To write a guide for this champion.
So I have two funny anecdotes from this time where I think our worlds started to collide. So one, Doublelift, after he'd moved in with me, he was going to go to college, figured out he couldn't because of he didn't qualify for financial aid because he was still connected to his parents. Mm-hmm. And the week when he went to orientation and figured this out, he's like, I figured out that I can probably still pay rent and figure out how to live on my own for a while because Steve has offered me a good amount of money to write guides for, I think he at the time said his website or whatever. And so that's it's fun because I think that's a little bit when the timeline started, because I remember you and it was a generous amount of money for players who were trying to figure out how to do this full time. Mm-hmm. And so it's cool that even then the beginnings of you figuring out ways to get players to be able to sustain themselves.
Yep.
But the other thing is, at one point in time, and I know this is a sensitive subject, but hopefully time has healed all wounds. Mm-hmm. Did you get benched from your own team?
Oh, no, I remember the exact moment.
And was it unrestricted or was it cursed by this point in time? Because I think it was right around the same time.
I think it might have been really soon after we renamed to Curse.
Because as you get into this, I should say, Peter came to me and was like, oh my God, this is so awkward. Because he was an 18-year-old kid. He's like, the team is making me have this conversation with Steve because we think we should get a different support, and it's his team, and I have to figure this out. And so then
I want to talk to Peter about this.
You should,
because it would be really fun to talk about it.
Because I feel like it would be very fascinating. So I remember him telling me that. Then later on I talked to him, he's like, oh, he actually took it really well. So please fill the blank 10 years later on how this went down.
Well, as I recall it, and again, this is a long time ago, but I do remember we were playing in a specific game, or it was a tournament or some goal for low, who knows what kind of match it was. And we were playing bot lane, and the enemy team had Ezreal, and I was playing Sona, and I can't remember what AD carry he was playing.
Sure.
And I didn't body block an Ezreal Q. And it was the most obvious body block. It was I was full health, he was about to die, and I literally moved out of the way to dodge the Ezreal Q so that he would take it.
Yeah.
It's just
not what
the antithesis of what a support means, right? Just whatever. And I was right after that game, and Peter was like, I can't remember what he said. He said something along the lines of hey, we shouldn't play with you. And I think my immediate reaction was I know I'm bad.
Yeah, okay.
I know I'm bad. The time has come.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that happened for obvious reasons.
Yes. Maybe would not have made it into the LCS in the beginning. Okay, so you could have just walked away at that point in time. But I guess by this point in time, you'd already started to think of it as a small business, and so you decided to stick around and keep running it?
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah, I had the contract with Curse. I think we had a couple other small sponsors that were paying in mouse pads or whatever, right? Helping cover some of our travel. And then I think when it started to get pretty serious, from a competitive perspective, is when I think it was called the ESL Pro League. It was Intel Extreme Masters.
Oh, yeah.
Some sort of this is before LCS was rolled out around the world in different regions.
Right.
There was no structure.
Right.
And they basically outsourced it to
IM, yes.
IM.
Because it's IM and MLG that were kind of doing everything for a while, but IM started doing it at first.
Right. And so you had to do online qualifiers in order to get a spot to go and then play at a particular city.
Yeah.
And we ended up qualifying for a bunch of them. And so I think it was like Germany, and I think there was a couple in China. And so when that happened, then it was the first time it started to affect my work, my IRL work,
right?
Like my real, like my career, that I had been.
Because I also assume that like you were probably doing quite well for yourself on that side, and then on the other side, you're getting paid in mouse pads.
Yeah, exactly.
And doing little deals with Curse, and so kind of for most people, I'm sure your friends would have, or colleagues would have been like, "Why are you wasting your time on this?" But you kept with it.
Right. It's actually interesting. I think it was like one tournament in particular. I think it was the China tournament where I needed to go and travel for like 2 weeks. And that was a big deal because, I had staff, I had a whole business. Like, I couldn't be gone for that long. It's not something I could just do on the side. And I remember asking a lot of my friends and family, should I go and start doing this gaming thing full time that is like a small fraction of what my current total income is? And I remember everyone, my parents, all my close friends were like, no or fuck no. Like, just don't do it. Like, that's suicide. You've been building this whole financial planning practice with hundreds of clients and, hundreds of millions in assets under management. What in the... Like, no, Steve, you're absolutely crazy. Like, and I spoke to one friend in particular. Her name was Marcel Saab. And we sat down. We were just having a froyo, actually. And I asked her, and she was just like, Steve, there's only one life. You have to follow your heart. You're never going to let this go if you don't do it. And I remember that moment, and then I was just like, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And then I just like sold everything, packed my life in a bag, and decided to go all in.
That must have been so scary. I mean, you had to go into your work and basically say like, hey guys, I'm ending this business, and you have to figure out how to like sell it and get out of it and all that stuff. Like it must have been very intimidating.
It was nerve-wracking, but I think I was also just so excited to like be able to follow something that I had been doing ever since I was young, from the Oregon Trail days and the MLG competitions and NBA Jam and playing StarCraft and Warcraft and Dota and League of Legends. It was like my heart was in this place that I didn't see a clear line of sight of being lucrative.
Yeah.
And this moment where it may have been was really kind of quite amazing, right? And at the time, it wasn't about any money or notoriety. It was just the love for the game. I know it sounds really cheesy, but
well, I like that
that was what's driving me.
You graduated college and your thing was like, I just need to make money. And then, several years later, you find yourself being like, okay, maybe that's not what I want to prioritize right now. I want to go for this dream that I have.
Very much so. I think, I was in a very fortunate position to have been very successful in the finance world, and then once you realize you have enough money to have all the things that you need and want to sustain yourself, it's about your impact and what you do and where your heart is and your passions and mastery with that, and that's where you get your energy from. That's where you get your happiness from. So anyway, so yes, it was like a big opportunity to go and see that through.
Thank you so much to Grubhub for sponsoring the show. It's been really cool to just sit down and have casual conversations with friends I've had for many, many years and just reminisce about the past and learn a little bit more about them. If you like Grubhub, please go check them out. There's a link in the description below, and be sure to check out the Grubhub Guarantee, where if your food does not arrive on time or there's an issue with it, they will make it right. All right, so then you decided to get into all of this. As you mentioned, like the finances of it at the time, and it's funny to say this as we're recording in the Alienware training facility that you have in Santa Monica. We're surrounded by all sorts of sponsor logos and all this different stuff. But how confident were you at the time that this was actually going to become something that was from a financial perspective, worthwhile pursuit?
Honestly, I don't think it became clear until the end of 2015.
Okay.
Which was much later. which is much later.
Because this is now like basically 4 or so years.
Yeah, in the gaming thing. But when the first 4, I guess, years or so, I was struggling.
Yeah.
I was super struggling. Like Damien could probably attest to this. We had to get this shitty little apartment in Santa Monica, which we were paying like $800 a month of rent for. I couldn't afford, because I basically drained all of my savings.
Yeah.
I had one property left that I was thinking about selling in order to like keep things going, and I ended up getting my like mattress off the in the front that somebody had ditched that had like that. I was in the struggle bus. Yeah. Okay, and then I didn't think it became clear until LCS rolled out and they were going to make permanent spots, and there was this $10 million cost associated with
the franchising side.
The franchising system, and that there was like this line of sight that had a horizon that was lengthy in the future, and it just wasn't these like short-term tournaments and short-term leagues, and there was going to be a future in esports. And so when all of that happened and we took investment, then that was the first time that I ever paid myself more than like $30K out of the company.
Right.
It was like, that was when I realized it.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I guess.
A little bit before all of that, there was this interesting thing that happened where you had been attached to Curse. Everybody knew Team Curse. This was a brand that existed that you had built that was it doing anything other than League at the time, or was it only League?
I think it was League, and then we picked up HBox.
Oh, right. Okay. So you had this team, and then I think what happens is Curse is like, we have to divest our esports side, right? Because they were trying to do Curse Voice. Something along those lines. So you need to figure out what's next. This must have been a scary time for you because you'd spent all these years building up this organization that was basically all backed by one entity. Mm-hmm. You had a couple sponsors at some point in time, and then you had to figure out what's next. So maybe you can take me through that time a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the downsides of not thinking about it as a business and thinking about more as just like following my heart and a hobby sort of thing was that I didn't set up my own brand when I started doing all of this. Like, why wouldn't you do that? Like, you create your own brand. I was like, nah, I'll just like sell the name of the company.
And when you think of it, TSM, CLG, these types of things is what you're referencing.
Right, exactly. Yes. Like, it's not that I created my own brand. Basically, Curse was paying for the naming rights associated with this entity.
Right.
And so when all the Curse Voice stuff ended up happening, that was when, Curse, the conglomerate, they had this product that was called Curse Voice, and they wanted to be able to go and sell that product to Riot Games, but Riot Games couldn't buy the product because of the conflict of interest of having Curse in the competitive league.
Yeah.
So they just needed to jettison all of the esports stuff that Curse owned in order to finalize that deal. And so at that time, I remember Hubert, who was the CEO of Curse at the time, and Brandon, who was the CFO, they're like, Steve, do you want to buy this and run it and do it? And so I said yes. And then the next thing was, oh, well, do I now create a new brand?
Right.
And I remember talking to like Evie, who was like a designer that I had on staff, and we were talking about what the brand would be, and we started doing workshops on. I won't share some of the names that we were thinking about.
Are there any of the names? Sarah,
no, I can't. So anyway, so we were doing all that, and then at the same time, we're thinking about, okay, well, what if I just merge with an existing esports organization, maybe further faster? And the first thing that came to mind was I wanted to make sure that I was aligned from a values perspective, and that was something that a very close mentor to me, Gene Zano, he taught me, which was, always stick to your values, no matter what, do what's right, even when it's hard. That's what is sustainable for your career, and that's how you'll build a company. And so I really took heart to that, and I wanted to make sure that I was aligned with somebody that had similar values. And at the time, within esports, there was so many different teams, and most of them had drama.
Yes.
And as they do still today.
Yes. No, they definitely do. But to your point, there was not very many teams that felt like they were running as like mature businesses, right?
Correct. Yes.
And especially on the League side, because League was way younger than a bunch of these other organizations, like, because I think I got into esports mostly from StarCraft, and I remember even though they probably had their own issues, there was like Evil Geniuses and Team Liquid and Complexity and all these other existing names. Whereas on the league side, you had like
Marn.
people's moms. Yeah, Marn was over here. People's moms running companies. You had all sorts of very interesting stuff.
Right.
So I'm sure that left you with an interesting slate of opportunities for teams.
There was a
to
short
talk to.
list. I'll put it that way. There was a short list at the time, and I remember reaching out to Victor and being like, "Hey, I know you don't know me, but would you take a call? I was thinking that we might join forces."
Okay.
And I think it would be really interesting to get his POV on it, but he probably was like, "Who the is this guy?"
Right. Well, because they had been as much as I love Victor, and I don't think any of this, but there was a group of like all those names I just mentioned, all like refused to get into League of Legends.
Yes.
Because of what you said earlier, there was almost like an ego thing about like, oh no, we have a Dota team and a StarCraft team.
There's like real. It's like kind of how we think of mobile gaming.
Right.
It's
right,
like
yes.
mobile gaming, like
yeah.
you know, like, but it's a real thing, right?
Yes. But by the time you were looking, I think people had noticed that the viewership on League had changed dramatically.
And they were like,
yes. Okay,
Yes.
so you hit up Victor.
I had a Victor, and I just like basically proposed to him. I said, "Hey, I'm either going to create a new brand or maybe we could join forces. Let's talk about what that might look like." And we put together a spreadsheet with all of the assets of each of the enterprises, and we also got to know each other and talked a lot about principle and philosophy and values and perspective and how to handle decision making, process for decision making, and yeah, that whole process basically led to a conclusion that we should join up and become co-CEOs.
Was that intimidating? Because if that had not gone over well, like obviously it sounds like you did a lot of the due diligence, but if you'd gotten in 6 months, you guys wanted to kill each other.
Oh gosh,
like,
yeah.
It would have been really tough because it's like, what happens then? Like, are you trying to pull your stuff back out of TL or like, I don't know. I don't even know if you let yourself think about that, but
Right.
I mean,
and that's like kind of how, I don't know all the details associated with it, but all the optic stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, yeah, the management dissonance and ownership could really kill an organization and like where it ends up becoming. I think we've always stayed true to our word. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're those types of people, I guess. Like our word means a lot, and our follow through and commitment. And I think, you know, folks like to jump off the ship when things get tough. You know, I think it's like human nature. And I don't fault for people for doing that. It's just there are some folks that don't,
right.
And you go through thick and thin together, and that's what we've done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was like a little bit of like a marriage, or like the idea of marriage, where you know, through sickness and health and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's very similar from a business perspective.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's also just I feel like you guys probably complement each other pretty well too, because TL now becoming such a global business. Like I know he's over in Europe most of the time, you're over here. I think you guys tend to operate you have kind of different games that you both tune into, as maybe the best way to put it, right?
Yeah. Basically, it's really about personal interest.
Yeah.
Like I freaking love TFT. I play it, so I want to manage. I want it to roll up to me so that I can get involved with TFT. I play a lot of Apex Legends. I want to run the Apex Legends team.
Yes.
And then so on and so forth. And so some of it has to do with that. Some of it has to do with region, but it's primarily interests and then
Hopefully
what we get
you guys
involved in.
Never both want
The same game?
Yeah, exactly. Like some game will come out at some point in time where you both will love it, and then that will be the end of Team Liquid because you guys will.
We'll fight to the death.
Yeah,
we'll have to do a StarCraft match. Which he used to be a StarCraft pro.
No, he would crush you. You should.
No. I'll still beat him.
Really?
I'll still.
You
beat
think
him.
you're better than him now, even though he used to? Okay.
I think so. I play way too many video games still.
Okay.
I think he's kind of trailed off a little bit more so
okay.
than I have. So
Gotcha.
We could do like a decathlon where it was like 10
Yeah.
different games, and I'd probably beat them all.
Honestly, not a bad Alienware content piece at some point in time, or Team Liquid content.
I think he
piece or
wouldn't
something.
sign up for it.
Yeah.
He know that he would lose.
You take all the cred from him?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. Victor, if you're watching this. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit to get to current day stuff for LCS and for your business and all that stuff. What are the things that are stressful and spooky for you now? Because there was a time where it was about trying to to figure out if you should leave your previous job. And then it was about like getting this business to a good place. Now, obviously, it feels like things are doing pretty well. I don't know if it's just like this year when the LCST wasn't doing well, if that feels like gives you a ton of anxiety and stress. Like, what are the challenges that you face these days?
It's a good question. I will say, in just full honesty and transparency, I think this year has been one of the hardest years for me personally in my career and life, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's just the convergence of macroeconomics associated with like inflation and the war, and a lot of layoff happening in tech, the S&P dropping, asset depreciation, the list goes on, right? Coupled with making such a big bet in League of Legends and failing, definitely hurts. And I think, running an organization of this caliber and size requires a whole slew of competencies that I've had to learn how to master, and it's new territory. It's very different than running an organization that's kind of bootstrapped and less than 20 people. We have 365 staff. 365 staff.
Yeah.
We have headquarters in 3 continents. Like, it's an incredible organization, and I think the combination of all of these factors is it's been a stressful, definitely a stressful time, I've just been kind of like grinding and learning and figuring it out as I go along, and so I guess that's been a little bit challenging. I think if I were to point to one challenge in particular, I think if I consider Team Liquid and where it's going, it's a multi-generational esports brand.
Yeah.
It's just like a professional sports brand. It's people that root for the Dallas Cowboys or the whatever, right? Manchester, whatever. And Team Liquid will be around. I know it. I know it to be a fact because I'm already seeing the generational stuff happening, like where kids are rooting for Team Liquid. And so, we need to be able to navigate that future, and the most important part of it is understanding who Team Liquid is. And it sounds so simple. It's like, what is our identity?
Yeah.
But that is like the actual basis for becoming a multi-generational organization that fans cheer for around the world, irrespective of culture or language. And figuring out who we are is one of the hardest things to do, and so that's probably the biggest challenge.
Well, I think there's 2 things there that are super interesting to me. Is like, one, I assume a lot of people would say, hey, back in the day, whenever you were trying to figure out like how to afford where you're going to live for this team and all this stuff, like that would be the hardest part. But to your point, I guess like challenges get like really crazy when the scope gets so big. Whenever it's no longer like, okay, cool, like I can pay this player another 10 grand or something like that, versus how crazy the stakes get whenever you have a ton of employees, and then you're like, okay, well, we really, like, I know you talked a lot about Worlds being in North America this year and how important it was to you to have a really compelling roster for that team, and then for it to not come through. I'm sure in some ways, like, that is way more difficult than early on when it's like, okay, guys, we're all together, like, let's see if we can win this, like, go for LOL or this IEM or something like that, yeah?
Yeah, there's just so much on the line. It's not just the championship.
Yeah.
It's the legacy. It's the brand. And it's, and when you miss those moments, it hurts. And, it's kind of interesting. There's just a lot of esports teams that are out there that are, I think, struggling to find their identity. Some of them are very distinctive. Like, if I say the word phase, certain things come to mind. Right? They're very good at delineating their brand out in the marketplace and the perception associated with it.
Yeah.
I said FlyQuest, things come to mind.
Yeah.
Right? And if I were to say Dignitas, maybe less.
Right.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have thrown.
No. It's okay. On my channel, we can throw Dignitas under the bus.
No, I love Michael and everything he's building. I'm just trying to prove the point of
not
there
everyone.
are some brands that have a very kind of strong identity in this space, and I would even put Team Liquid, to some degree, we've lost a little bit of like that understanding of who Team Liquid is.
Yeah.
And being able to define that and then integrate it into every single thing that you publish and do and create and train and onboard and it's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of people hearing this, it's like funny because it's like we talked a lot about your personal challenges, and people say like brand identity is like a personal challenge, but I imagine that, similar to what I was just saying, like whenever it's just go, you're more focused on winning and like how do we win rather than like what are all these other bigger picture things that we really have to worry about. And because you are so attached to a lot of this stuff, I'm sure that like the brand identity crisis might also sometimes feel like a personal identity crisis.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, and this is not healthy, and I'm not advocating this. I'm very much a proponent of mental health and balance, but I am imbalanced as a person.
Yeah.
I spend way too much time working, and I don't mean that as a good thing. I mean it as just unfortunate answer to your question, which is I unfortunately don't have much of a separation between personal and work. My life is work, and it's not a good thing. And I still struggle to figure out that like pie of family, personal, and business. And I just feel like my pie is askew right now, and it's hard because like if I were to say, oh, how many sleepless nights have I had? In the past year. Well, of those, how many was I thinking about family? 0. How many was I thinking about personal? 0. They're all work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like that's unfortunately how it is, and it's a responsibility I bear. I don't mean to like ask for what's the word, empathy or something. That's just the fact of the matter, I guess.
Yeah. How hard does it hit you when you have a year like this where I like what was fascinating to me on the outside was it not just that the team was failing, but there was also you guys somehow, maybe because TSM disappeared, like became the villains of the league. Like I don't know how often you dive in on like the community stuff, but there was just like a lot of conversation around like, oh, like I'm rooting against TL because they just spend so much, or like they don't have North American players or whatever. And like those are separate conversations, right? About how much, but like just for you personally, how much does it affect you whenever you start to see kind of like the crowd turn against you in a way that like was very different from when you guys were back to back champions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it comes a little bit with the territory associated with building a super team. I don't think that you could insert any brand. Yeah. And if they're going to build a super team and not produce results as expected, which those expectations are super high, you're going to get shade thrown at you. So I think it just comes with the territory. That's okay. I think a lot of the true TL fans that have been along for the ride know we're way more dynamic than that, and we are operating a lot of different games, and we've been supporting the academy system probably more so than a lot of other teams. I mean, we had Curse Academy, we had Team LOL Pro Academy, we had Team Liquid Academy, and then we had our main rosters, and we had amateur teams, and we've like helped with a lot of the scouting combine and all the like. My heart has been a lot in the rookie development. It's just that we've always opted for what we thought was more predictable results by bringing in veteran players rather than the more risk associated with going with rookies.
Yeah.
But that's something that we're revisiting for next year.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I have, as part of doing the show, I have a gift for you. It's a Grubhub gift card. So if you
$1 million on here?
Yes, $1 million. It might not be the amount that you're used to based off of what the reports are around your budgets, but hopefully enough to buy a couple more Jersey Mike subs.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, of course.
I appreciate it, Travis.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me for lunch. Is there anything that you want to say to anybody out there?
I will like to say thanks for cheering us on in League of Legends this year. Sorry to disappoint all of the fans on our performance, but in tried and true fashion, we are not giving up. We have not killed our spirit and our will. It's the most important thing. So we're bringing that to the off season, and I'm pretty excited about some of the things that we have cooking. So thanks for cheering for us. Appreciate you.
Thank you again, Steve. And for everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all things esports right here on my YouTube channel. As well as... Hey, thank you so much for watching Dinner With, and thank you to Grubhub for sponsoring it. It's been so cool to be able to sit down in a really nice setup with some longtime friends of mine and eat a meal and just kind of talk about things, reminisce, learn a little bit more about them. And all of that is because Grubhub has been sponsoring the show. You can check them out at the link below. It's really helpful for the channel if you do. And be sure to check out the Grubhub guarantee, where if your order's late or there's something wrong with it, they will make it right. So again, thank you to Grubhub. Thanks for watching. And shout out to Team Liquid for letting us use their Alienware training facility for this episode.